So we're back in Pro Tools, and what I would love to show you again is a little bit of signal structure, so the whole routing, and I want to introduce a new Reverb plugin. You already know the Deverb, which I like in a lot of sound designs a lot. So, for example, when I did Ooze, I I did most of the reverbs with the deverb, and the one I'm going to show you today is a little bit different. That's the Space plugin. Uh, the main difference is Deverb is an algorithmic plugin. Algorithmic meaning you have an algorithm just computing a certain amount of reflections and a certain room size, and you can play around with these parameters. Compared to the Deverb, the Space is a concept based on a thing called convolution reverb. Convolution reverb is based on playing a sound, a so-called sweep sound in a room, recording the reflections produced by these sounds in the room with a microphone, and then in the end you process this recording, and you end up with kind of a clap sound, and this clap sound represents how the room reacts to the sound played on the speakers. The sound played on the speakers is a so-called sweep. So it's a sound from 20 hertz, so the deepest bass, till 20 kilohertz, so the highest highs, during maybe 3 or 5 or 10 seconds. You record this sound, and what you record is the reflections plus the sound. Then you deduct the sound and put it on a zero timeline. So all the frequencies are put to a 0 point, and then you end up with the clap. The big advantage of this concept is that you can not only record a sound in a room, you can also record a speaker. So, for example, you can measure the frequency response of your cell phone speakers. You can use this in a sound design when you need to place a sound in a television set or on a handy speaker or whatever. You can also record old analog reverbs, such as plate reverbs. So this is a plate reverb that was built in the 50s. It's vintage stuff. They go for prices as high as $20,000 for one reverb. And in a software like Space, you can use an impulse you've been playing through the reverb, plate reverb, recording what the plate did with your sounds, and then emulate it to use in a plugin. So what I'm able to do in Pro Tools when I use for example, this plate, that's this original plate I'm gonna use now. I have just a sound to play from. That's the voice you already know from the
Nobody that is
from a few weeks ago. That's David McKee.
Nobody that is.
And now when I play it with some reverb, then this plate reverb, for example, sounds like this.
Nobody that is, except 6 men from either side, who turn their backs on one another.
And it has a special characteristic. So in here you have thousands of impulse responses, and some of them are internal responses they recorded. And what I did is I worked on many films, and I recorded hundreds of impulse responses of different acoustic settings, and you're gonna find those in the eigene Impulse. So, for example, you can jump into a hotel room
Nobody that is, except 6 men from either side, who turn their backs on one another. Nobody that is.
You can jump to a whatever Güterbahnhof in Zurich. Doesn't exist anymore.
Nobody that is, except 6 men from either side.
It's a long reverb. I've also been shooting film in like ice hockey.
Nobody that is,
venues,
except 6 men from either side, who turn their backs on one another.
Or in bedrooms.
Nobody that is, except 6 men from either side, who turn their backs on one another.
There is one group. They did a stop motion with a robot, and the setting is in a trash can. And what they could, for example, do is there is a whole section with tiny spaces. You can use an iron bath, for example.
Nobody that is, except 6 men from either side, who turn their backs on one another.
And I think this really illustrates very well how powerful the reverb in a sound design can be. You can really jump from one setting to the other. You can give your sounds a very distinct flavor. You could, for example, jump in a glass cup.
Nobody that is, except 6 men from either side, who turn their backs on one another. Nobody that is.
Now, one concept you should know about is a reverb send can be before the volume fader, which goes directly to the bass master, or after. One concept is called post fade, so one fader after the other, or pre-fade. So the reverb goes before the volume fader. So when I pull my volume fader down, I only play reverb.
Nobody that is, except 6 men from either side.
What you need to do is you need to put your send to pre. So this blue button needs to be lit. It also lights up in the sense view, and then you can turn down the main fader, and you don't lose the reverb. And there's one thing you can do with this setting. For example, if you want to let something go into nirvana, you can use a long reverb as, for example, the Güterbahnhof. I'm gonna erase those automation lines. I go down with the volume, I come up with the reverb and see what happens.
Nobody that is, except 6 men from either side, who turned their backs on one another and started to travel the world, searching for a place where they might live and work in peace.
So this setting you can use when you need to create acoustic distance. Then you can, like this, you can easily control the amount of direct sound and the amount of reverberated sound. So if you have scenes like these in your animations, I often use the pre-setting. Some things about parameters. What you already know is the reverberation time. I'm gonna jump to the deverb now because you see it much more easily. So in the deverb,
nobody that is, Accept 6
So
pen
that's
from
the
either
reverb
side.
playing now. And I have 4.5 seconds reverberation time, and I can play around with this parameter by pressing Control Command. Now I switch here in the reverberation plugin to the reverberation time, which is put to 4.5 at the moment, and I can go down, for example, to 400 milliseconds and then go up to 48 seconds in the end. Let's see how this sounds.
Nobody, that is, except 6 pen from
You
either
see the
side,
automation here?
who turn their backs on one another. Nobody on another.
You see how you can create infinite reverbs like this by just playing?
Who turn their backs on one another. On another.
I need to bypass the plugin to cut it now, and you can work with this with the sound like this. You can record it with the recording function into Pro Tools. Let's see.
Who turn their backs on one another.
Oh, I didn't record it. Sorry. Let's see.
Who turn their backs on one another.
Of course, I need to mute from here. Record it again.
Who turned their backs on one another and started to travel the world.
Okay. And I often record stuff like reverbs or also delays. I also have a delay in this session. I can show you. Let's see what the delay does with my sound here.
And started to travel the world.
Now I want to use the last world and play it in the delay. Let's see. It's an effect very often used. You start dancing, I can understand.
And started to travel the world.
This tape echo, it's not in your version of Pro Tools yet, but you can take it from the freeware plugins, Zusatzplugins für Studierende, and there is the tape echo, for example. That's a whole bunch of plugins you can also install in your notebook.
And started to travel the world.
Why does it start to sound that way? Because I put the feedback to 100%. So the whole the whole sound is looped again with a little bit of low cut, so it starts to get more dark.
Started to travel the world.
If I keep it that way, it will at some point distort.
And started to travel the world.
Of course, you can also change the timing, so you can jump to the delayed time, and by, for example, make it slower, it will create a different effect.
To travel the world.
And so on. So I think you're gonna have a lot of fun with these different plugins. What I've shown you now is plugins I always use via send. Me personally, I never use deverb via insert? Because usually I have 20 tracks with clips on them, Foleys, FX, voices, and I want to use the same reverberation on all those tracks. If I want to do it with 20 deverbs on every track, I always need to change the reverb parameters on every plugin, which doesn't make sense. And I use 20 times as much computing power. Of course, our laptops are strong today. We don't need to really care about processing power. But still, it's much easier to use it via send, and it's much easier controllable. The only reason I also accept a deverb on an insert is when you only use it on one track. If you use it only on one track, you can use the deverb as an insert instead of using it via send. Then you can also control the amount of direct sound versus reverberated sound with this parameter here. It's the dry wet parameter. If you are 100% wet, then the whole I'm sorry about that. Then the whole signal gets reverberation. If you're 100% dry, you have zero reverberation. Okay. So by pressing Control Command and click the parameter, I get the automation line. And what I can do now is show you the difference between 100% wet and dry.
I started to travel the world, searching for a place where they might.
Sorry. I need to have.
Turn their backs on one another and started to travel the world, searching for a place where they might live and work in peace.
So the dry wet parameter is I never use it when I use the plugin on an aux return, like the Bass Hull 1 and 2. But you can use it when you use the plugin as an insert on a track. Okay, what else? I just placed a few plugins as an insert you can play around with if you want to create some effect, like the rectify.
Who turn their backs on one another. Who turn their backs on one another. Who turn their backs on one another.
Perfect to create computer voices. By pressing Control Command, you always get to the parameters. You can play around with them, see what happens.
Who turn their backs on one another.
More or less effects.
Who turn their backs on one another.
Then there's another one called Lo-Fi.
Who turn their backs on one another.
You can do sample size reduction. You can for example, go to 4-bit recording, which creates a lot of noise.
Who turn their backs on one another.
Not now. It's already automated. Let's see.
Who turn their backs on one another. Who turn their backs on one another.
Put noise in it.
Who turn their backs on one another.
You can saturate the signal.
Who turn their backs on one another.
Or put more distortion.
Who turn their backs on one another.
And one plugin called Sci-Fi, which sometimes I also like to create robotic voices.
Who turn their backs on one another. Who turn their backs on one another. Who turn their backs on one another.
Of course, Also with this plugin, every parameter is automatable.
We turn the backs on one another. We turn the backs on one another. We turn the backs on one another.
R2D2, exactly. Have you seen the film yesterday?
Not yet, no. It was booked out.
Why not? I have neither. Okay. Do you have any questions to that?
Is there a tutorial for this? Yes.
Yes, there is.
That was a lot of information for 10 minutes.
That's why I recorded it. It was actually 20 minutes.
Can hear you giggling.